Hi, I'm Christy Roach. I'm the head of end user marketing at Airtable. Airtable is a platform that lets teams of all sizes and types build their own solution and truly build their own software regardless of technical skill. So people use Airtable to manage production and media operations. They use it to manage campaigns and product development. They use it to manage their cattle. We actually have a ton of cattle ranchers that use Airtable. It's an infinitely flexible tool that hundreds of thousands of companies and some of the world's top enterprises use to really just manage their workflow and build the right process for their team. I am lucky enough to lead our end user marketing team. This is a team of about 6 to 7, depending on how my recruiting is going, marketers who focus on core and growth product marketing, pricing and packaging, customer enablement and education, as well as our community efforts. So a lot of things in there. Before Airtable, I've worked at a number of different companies. I've kind of found that my sweet spot is joining a company when it's between 1 to 200 people and scaling it out from there. I started my career at a really big company and then kind of found my sweet spot after that. And really for me, I've spent a lot of my time focused on product-led growth. When I thought about what I would talk about for a talk like this, the prompt that stood out most to me was one where I could really just focus on the mistakes that I've made and the things that I wish I could go shake my 21-year-old self on the shoulders and kind of like steer myself away from. I have found the most value from talks like this from folks who are real candid and real tactical. So hopefully you'll be able to get some of that from me. So when I went about putting this together, I kind of bucketed things into 4 big takeaways. But my biggest piece of advice is do not expect those takeaways to only be a single digit. I really have more like 400, 1,000 things that I wish I had known, things that I learned the hard way. And yes, of course, there are things that I wish I had done differently. And also, I do think it's important to go through the experience of making mistakes, of doing things the wrong way, because I don't really think, you learn the lesson until you've done it the wrong way, and then you do it the right way later on, and you're like, oh, right, like that's how that should actually feel. But hopefully you can either avoid some of the mistakes or at very, very least know that you're not alone in some of these learnings. So let's go over them at a high level, and then I'm going to dig in and give you real specifics on each one. So here are my 4 big learnings from 10 years as a product marketer. First, and I feel like the biggest myth I want to dispel about product marketing is there is no set path for this role. I wish I had known that earlier when I was frustrated or when I was wondering why I wasn't, making the progress, or I was hoping for somebody to kind of tell me what my next step was. What I learned is that just because you've gotten into product marketing does not actually mean you've narrowed it down all that much. It's a really broad discipline. You can do competitive intelligence, you can do solutions, you can focus on sales enablement, you can focus on product-led growth, you can do product launches, you can do market intelligence. Those are just some of them. I think that for me, one of the things that I really struggled with was feeling like I needed to really find my niche, and this is what I do, and this is what I'm great at. That and also wanting to do everything, which we will get to later. It's another thing that I learned the hard way. But really, as you grow your PMM career, my biggest piece of advice, and the advice I would give my younger self, is focus right now on broadening your skill set. Understand what product marketing is, understand what it does. As you get that experience, you can narrow down naturally into the thing that you really are great at or that you really want to build your career in. And I think the biggest thing is if you can see this kind of squishiness of role growth and what a PMM career path looks like as a positive, your career will really, really grow. I feel like I really started to hit my stride in PMM when I stopped waiting for the next step and started instead orienting myself towards what the business needed, how I could help that growth, spotting problems and solving them. And the growth happened because of that, rather than waiting for a set path. The second thing I wish I had known, and I feel like many of you will chuckle at this, is that no one really knows what product marketing does. You might not know what product marketing does, and that you are a product marketer. So I think the thing that's super important is, you need to go into your relationships with your partners, with your different teams, and really need to help clarify how you want to work together, what that could look like. I have kicked myself over different relationships I've had where I should have really had an intro meeting and just, gotten some clarity or understood what their assumptions were about PMM. Um, and even if people have worked with product marketers before, what I can tell you is that a lot of product marketing teams function really differently than others. So just because somebody knows how to work with PMM in their mind doesn't mean they necessarily know how you like to work or how to work with you. Um, and the other thing, separate from all this advice I just gave about clarifying your role, I think the biggest thing I needed to learn is rather than trying to tell people how to work with me, what our roles and responsibilities should look like, when to bring me in, focus just more on showing value. What can you bring to the conversation? What insight do you have? What information can give people a clearer picture to make a better decision? How do you continue to show value and let that be the thing that makes your working relationships work versus focusing so much on just like clarity? Third, I cannot take credit for this phrase. This was said in a learning talk that was given at one of my former companies. One of our members of the board came in and talked about her experiences, and she said, "Your competition is outside the building." And I think this is so important as a company grows and scales. Alignment is super hard. It's so hard. Getting alignment is, pushing a boulder up the hill. It is herding cats. It is every metaphor you can think of. It's also 75% of this role. There is something really, really important about it. And it can feel as you go through it frustrating. You can feel like, you and your colleagues and your partners are just like really butting heads. And the thing that I feel like I really wish I could have known is that like no one was ever trying to like get in the way of an initiative or ruin something. They were just doing their job. And really the thing that has helped me so much in this work is remembering that I'm not competing with coworkers. We all work for the same company. Our competition is, in the market. And if I can assume positive intent from the folks that I work with, I'm going to be so much more effective in working with them because they can feel that. You know what it's like to work with somebody who's assuming the best in you, and you know what it's like to work with somebody who seems skeptical of you. I don't know why it took so long for that to click for me of like, I like it when people do that for me. Why don't I do that with other people? But you live and you learn. And I think this one's big. And then I think the fourth one is we may have all reported to someone who treated marketing like this just incredible art. And we may have, reported to someone who seemed to feel like there is like a specific way to do something. And here and there, that is true. And there is a real craft to marketing and product marketing for sure. But it's not rocket science. I feel like I always just waited for myself to like get it or figure out the exact way to do something or have this like natural thing come to me where I just like be able to sense it. And yes, you get better at product marketing, but you don't have to treat it like this black box. If you don't know something, you could probably ask your customer and they tell you. If you're not sure how to do something, why don't you see how other companies do it? If you feel overloaded, you're probably doing too much on your own and not collaborating well. I think that I made this job really complicated early in my career. I made it something that was difficult, and I thought there was like glory in like how difficult this role was. This role is super hard. Don't make it harder on yourself. Is my big takeaway. So now that you've got the primer, let's dive in on some of these. Let's start with the fact that there is no set career path. So I've already said that. But for me, I got into marketing for a very inadvisable and kind of weird reason, which is I have a sister who is 9 years older than me, which means when I was in high school, she was in her 20s, living my dream in San Francisco. And I spent one weekend when I was 16 years old staying with her in her apartment. I got to shadow her at work, and that was all I needed. I was going to work in marketing. And to be honest, one, horrible career advice, do not choose a path because of that. And two, watching, your older sister get to, go get coffee in the middle of the day while you are in an AP English literature class is not actually a good representation of what it's like to be in the working world. But for me, marketing, was something I was very lucky that I chose. It was a very, very good fit for me. As I started, I think I had this vision that there was like a very clear set of steps. And I specifically remember as I was trying to move into product marketing formally, as I was trying to move into management, um, and even now, as I've gotten more senior in my organization, I look towards, a goal of being in the executive suite. It's really easy to slip into mindset of there's a certain formula of things you need to do. Check a box and you'll get there. And that's just not the case. One of the things that I find often I did, and that the teams that I have led or folks that I have mentored, they often hear something that they need to get experience in and feel like they need to do it once, and they're like, "Great, I can check that off my list." And really, that's not how this work goes. Um, Interestingly enough, my career journey can look pretty linear. And I put this up there not to show all of the steps that I've taken, but instead to really remind folks who are in that struggle of trying to move up in their careers that even if you see someone's LinkedIn or you interview with someone or you see someone who has this really admirable career path and it looks really clear, they went from associate to product marketing manager to senior to group to director to senior director, in there probably felt so squishy. And so let's give some insight into what that looked like for me. 2011 to 2014, your first 3 years of work, in my point of view, are just figuring out what it's like to do your job. One, what is it like to work in an office? What is it like to not be in school anymore? Two, what are the options that are available to you? How do you manage deadlines? How do you work with other people? Three, making a ton of mistakes. I have never gotten harsher feedback than I got when I was a junior person on a team, just really mucking it up when it came to how I, you know, collaborated with somebody or talked to somebody. And in that muck is where you get the learning. And so I think, for earlier career employees and for myself earlier, be less scared of that. Don't be a bad person. Don't be a bad employee, but be less scared of making mistakes. These are the years to do it. And really, the goal in the first 3 years of career, you will find people who at 25 are VPs and maybe they're prodigies, maybe they're working at a 4-person company. Do not judge your journey based on someone else's. Find the fit in the first 3 years. That's my biggest takeaway. Going into the next 3 years, a big thing for me was testing different company sizes. I went to be really early in the first 50 at a startup and I crashed and burned at it. And I, at the time, felt like it was such a failure. But really, I learned so much of, a seed stage company might not be as glamorous as it seems. It might be a lot of work. Maybe I need more coaching before I'm able to do that. This is when I actually learned what a product marketer does, not just what's written on a resume or on a job application, but actually what the job felt like. And in those two things, as I got into a company that was a good fit for me and my skill set, that was a right size, that had the right leadership, I gained some confidence. And I do think that as a product marketer, I heard someone say this once. I also think, side advice, just take things that other smart people said and use them. Give them credit, don't co-opt it as yours, but I feel like a lot of people feel like they need to have original thoughts. One of the things that I heard that I thought was so smart, someone said, is product marketers always have an opinion. Earlier in my career, I was opinionated with no backing. Here is where I got opinionated because I knew the right information. I knew where to look. I knew how to plug myself in. And gaining that confidence also made me more opinionated in the process and a better product marketer as a whole. Moving into management, I think one thing I wish I could have told my 2017 self, I thought I was going to be an A+ manager. I read Harvard Business Review. I read some books. I sucked at it. First time managing, you're pretty bad at it. Be humble. Realize that you're just two people working together. Your goal is to unblock much more than to tell someone what to do. And stop worrying so much about it. And also, not everyone's going to like you all the time. I am a consummate people pleaser. That's all I want is for everyone to like me. This has been one of the hardest lessons I've learned. But in this early management, it was determining what my leadership style was through massive trial and error, learning how to manage up. So much of management, I think a lot of people think about as managing a team. And yes, that is a huge part. It is having one-on-ones, having career conversations, motivating people, understanding their different working styles. giving them clarity, pushing them without pushing them too hard. All of that is true. You want to know what I think is harder? Managing up, managing into the executive suite, getting the clarity from those more senior leaders in your organization, and then translating that well to your team and what you're doing, being able to pivot, being able to help people understand that big picture. This was a really hard skill set for me to learn. Don't brush off every interaction you have with an executive. Learn from them, understand their working style, ask them questions, and take each as an opportunity to learn how to build that muscle. And in 2017 to 2020, fixing my mistakes. I had direct reports that I needed to apologize to because I didn't necessarily set them up well, or I put them in a role that wasn't the perfect fit for them. And I was able to course correct that. I had direct reports that I kind of coddled, that I kind of shielded from hard stuff, that I was holding their career back because I wasn't pushing them, because I wanted so badly for them to feel good and safe. And so, early management isn't, you don't get to be the boss, really. You mostly get to help other people, and there's a lot of really great context and information that comes your way, but it's not always super, super easy. And now it's expanding my scope and influence. So I've recently taken on more than just product marketing, also community. I've really been focused on up-leveling my leadership skills, and that means not having to be involved in everything, coaching my team well up front and being able to let them run, and elevating my direct reports. At a certain point, a great leader is one that's name is not always lifted up, but the people that report to them are the names of rising stars. Don't be scared of your direct report success. Their success is your success. Create trust with them, and they will trust you back. I wish that I could just sit down and tell myself all those things, but you know what? I kind of needed to learn it on my own. So that is the first takeaway. Let's get into number 2. The one that I'm sure many of you watching have experienced. No one knows what the heck we do. Here are some of my favorite PMM misconceptions. Feel free to shoot me an all on LinkedIn with yours. You make our website look pretty. That's not true. I cannot design. Anyone who's seen me draw knows. The best I can do is draw stick figures with my nieces. You write our in-product copy. Now, I can do this. I have done this. I do this even today. But I'm not a copywriter. Turns out I'm much better at messaging and setting a strategy than I am at the exact words. Leave that to the professional. Oh, you're the person I Slack when I have a product that's ready and we want to launch it in 3 days. As we all know, you can't just write a blog post and call product launch done. You're someone I ask for help when I don't know who is supposed to do something. This is still true. And honestly, this is a misconception. This is also just how our role works. And this is my favorite quote I got from an engineer in one of my last jobs, which is, I'm not exactly sure what Christy does, but she's super helpful. Now, honestly, that is PMM in my eyes. Here's how to change perception and better define your role. 1, define your role and stay flexible. So in working with a new PM, in embedding with a new team, how do you create definition around what it is you do, how you should be working with the team, help people understand your working style? Do not tell them how to work with you, but instead just really share. When we are all remote, when we are all working, right now I am in the office, but often from my home office, it's really easy to not do these intro meetings because you just get into the work. Or, you decide to do an intro meeting, you get straight into talking about what somebody's working on instead of taking them to coffee. You got to build that baseline in order to do the work further on. But then stay flexible. I have seen so many product marketers do this, and I have done this. That's not my role. That's not how they should be working with me. That's not what's in my scope. And you know what? Career growth happens when you let go of some of that. Do not overextend yourself. Do not sign up for things that don't make sense, but stay flexible in your definition of what your role is. Your role might be growing without you even noticing it. And so I think there are kind of 2 sides to that coin. Second is to course correct when things don't go well. So often I watch myself get so frustrated. Why wasn't I in the voice of the customer conversation? Why didn't my PM loop me in? I'm in this product review and I haven't seen this before. And my first inclination was anger or frustration, when really That was the opportunity to say, this is a perfect example for me to sit down and clarify with you and align with you and figure out what, how we should work together. So rather than seeing those, moments where you're misaligned or you don't have it as something where it's like, oh, we're doing a bad job, see it as an opportunity. Sit down, have that clarifying conversation. It's much easier to do in the tactical. Do it when the product launch is murky and unclear. Don't do it at a high level when you don't have anything to point to, because often that work is not really going to net out into anything because it is all hypothetical. Third, continue to show value. This is the one that I care about more than anything else. I feel like, in 2016 to 2018, I spent a lot of time telling people PMM should be involved in that. Why isn't PMM in that? Why is my team not involved? Why aren't you working with us on this? I'm frustrated about this. I should have spent that time just showing value, showing why they should have me in the room, showing why I should be involved in that project. Never get too senior for something to show value. I always say I'm not above writing a support article if I need to. PMMs need to do that and show value, have a perspective, bring something to the table, and you will be so impressed and surprised with how your colleagues open up to you. Speaking of next learning, your competition is outside the building. Almost every industry has never been more competitive than it is today. In the world of collaboration and productivity software, which Airtable kind of fits into, we see ourselves as very specific, but there are more people in the space than ever. You have enough of a challenge, and my big push and this thing that I wish I had known is stop worrying about politics. Stop feeling frustrated with your coworkers. You both work for the same company. At the end of the day, you both want the company to succeed. You want your customer to succeed. And, to put it oversimply, or to oversimplify, I guess I should say, you both want your stock to be valuable. You both want the company to be successful. This is something that I really struggled with. And I really struggled with this because for a long time in PMM, my role was around execution. As I got more senior, my role got much more focused on driving alignment and driving clarity and getting people to buy into my point of view or hearing what somebody wanted and not telling them no, but actually convincing them that we should do it in a slightly different way. That work happens well when you really listen to other people. That work happens well when you do not stay rigid in your planning. And that work happens well when you are assuming positive intent from the people that you are working with. This is an insane diagram. And the reason I made it is because alignment can feel like conflict. So we won't read through all of these, but I actually use this as a case study of something that I'm working on today in my role, trying to get a lot of alignment around what our learning and education path is for customers and users of Airtable. Every single team represented with the circle is anywhere between 5 and 50 people. They all have different needs. They're coming to it from different angles. If you don't look at this as necessary, all of those angles being represented as necessary, all of these steps as really important to creating the best plan, this seems like an impossible mountain to climb. This seems like, oh my gosh, we're never ever going to get aligned. And if you look at each team as a barrier to, the thing you want to do, it can make it really difficult for you to be able to actually execute and actually get the work done and get the work done well. What you need to look at this as is different teams all coming together to make the work stronger. There's a really cheesy line of like, if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. Product marketing cannot, and I tried to do this so many times, product marketing cannot create programs, run them, execute them, and have them work well all on their own. You can't do it all yourself, and we'll get to that piece of feedback later. But you need all of these teams to buy in, and you can't get them to buy in if you just want them to buy in on your plan. And so my biggest piece of advice to myself at 24, when I was just trying to get everyone to, candidly, to do what I wanted them to do, is stop, drive alignment, focus it on the work, not what you want, and stop looking at people that are maybe disagreeing with you or not aligned with your plan as people that are getting in your way. They're not getting in your way. They're trying to do their job. understand what their role is, and you'll have a better understanding of how to get on the same page. I'm saying this into a webcam that I wish I could mail back 5 years ago to kind of help myself get through this as well. Last one, my favorite one, the one that I think I could have used more than just about anything when I was doubting myself or feeling overwhelmed or just not really getting it, is this job is not rocket science. At the end of the day, what you are focused on is understanding your customer, helping translate and communicate the value of your product to that customer, and better serving their needs every single day. Now, there are nuances in that role depending on what, again, with broad scope of product marketing, depending on what it is that you do. But I think what I could have used and what I could still use as someone who is a very, very fast-paced, has a tendency to get a little anxious about things person is a calming presence to say, this is not that hard, you're making this too hard. And that's hopefully a real point of encouragement for folks who are in this role that can feel daunting or overwhelming. If you get the opportunity to work on something that feels daunting and overwhelming, it's because people trust you to try to do it. If you can look at it as that rather than as something you might fail at, it's calming. And from there, if you look at it as something that's not rocket science, it might be hard. I've worked on pricing stuff that's super complicated, but we went through it step by step and we were able to figure it out. And thankfully, I had people around me who were there to tell me some of these things. And that helped me get through it. So hopefully I can kind of pay that forward. So let's go through some of my favorite problems and solutions and ways that it's easy to overcomplicate this job. Problem number one, I can't nail our messaging. So often, I thought of messaging as this thing that comes to you, like the great American novel that somehow you're just in your process, you're going to really find it. You want to know what? You often can't find your messaging if you're not necessarily the target customer. You want to know what the solution is? Test it with your customer. Ask them, understand what they're looking for and what they need, and tweak your messaging based on that. Also, pro tip that will make people trust your messaging much more versus I've worked on this for a long time. You can test it with your beta group. You can test it in your community. Another great thing is use the people in the network that you have. A lot of the softwares that I've worked on have tried to target marketers or people managers. And guess what? I know a bunch of those. It's okay if they're not, an actual customer of yours and they're someone from your network. You can often get insights faster that way. Problem number two, we've never done this before. I have found this so often at growth companies and startups that, you're trying to kind of hit this new phase of growth, do something you haven't done before, and it feels really overwhelming. Okay, the first step is see how other companies do it. There is this tendency that people have to try to do something net new on their own, think that they need to reinvent it or reimagine it. And you know what? You should never rip your competitors off. You should just go see how other companies do it because you're not the first person to have ever done this. And you can get some really interesting insights or points of view on how work can get done. Whether that is how people create, on the same path of learning, like a learning management system and a guided certification process, or it's a big product launch that you're launching in beta and you want to see how to do that, go see how other companies do it. Let that kind of influence your thinking without feeling like you need to do it exactly that way. But once you can get those frameworks, then you can make it your own. 3, I'm super overwhelmed. This project is really overwhelming. You usually need to clarify priorities. 9 times out of 10, it's because I was trying to do way, way, way too much. I was trying to do 4 videos in a launch rather than one really well done one. Sit down with your manager. As a people manager, I can tell you if you sit down and you say, here are the things on my list of work to do. Here's how I'm prioritizing them. Here's where I'm feeling overwhelmed. We can sit down and crank that out so fast and get the right priorities and create the right clarity for you and also for your team. Last one is there's too much on my plate. Product marketers have the tendency to do this so much. I do this all the time. I want to volunteer for everything. I want to do everything. If there's too much on your plate, it's because you're probably trying to do something entirely on your own. As PMMs, it can feel like you need to write the messaging, write the blog post, be the creative director of the video, make the pitch deck yourself. There are often people who would be happy to lean in and help you. There is often better work you could do if you did it with a team. I wish I could tell myself that every single day. And so my biggest tip, the thing that young Christy needed to know is good PMM isn't something that's done on its own in a silo. So those are my big lessons and learnings and things that I wish I could tell myself. I hope that there's something in here that resonated with you. I hope that there is something that felt either like a confirmation of something you already knew, made you feel less alone in this wild journey of being a product marketer that you can take and apply to your role. If you have any questions or anything you want to talk about, please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat with other product marketers. We're all in this crazy job together, and we might as well help one another out. Thanks so much.